Hello students, welcome to the MEMONEET. I'm Latakya. I'm presently working as a SME in the MEMONEET as a biology lecturer. So in the last video, we have actually discussed about the living world, right? So in living world, basically we have discussed about the biological, what is biodiversity. Then we have also discussed regarding the different ways of classification and the nomenclature. And the very important thing is taxonomical category, right? So these are the very important topics that we covered in the last video. And in today's video, we are going to study the second chapter, that is the biological classification. So what do you mean by biological classification? So it is actually a process of grouping various organisms together according to their similarities, dissimilarities, and phylogenetic descent is actually called as biological classification. So the various biologists has attempted to classify the living organisms. So in which the Aristotle was the very first person, okay, to attempt to classify the living organisms. So he actually classified the living organisms based on, like, he classified the plant into herbs, then shrubs, as well as trees based on their based on their height. Then he classified the animal into two groups based on the presence as well as absence of the red blood. Then again, it didn't felt any conveniency. Therefore, the Linnaeus, he gave two kingdom system of classification. So he divided the organism into two. That is, one is kingdom Plantae and the second one is kingdom Animalia. Again, it didn't felt inconvenient because there were some other organisms which are showing both the characteristics of plants as well as animal. So finally, we got five kingdom system of classification where Harich Whittaker, he proposed a five kingdom system of classification and he classified these organisms based on their cellular structure, then their complexity, mode of nutrients, phylogenetic relationship, as well as ecological role which is performed by those organisms. So in this way, the very first thing that you need to know is the very first scientist who proposed the nomenclature, that is, who attempt to classify the living organisms. And the second time, who gave the two kingdom system of classification, that is Linnaeus, and the five kingdom system of classification, that is R.H. Whittaker. Clear? So this is the five kingdom system of classification flowchart. So we have normally five kingdoms. The kingdom Monera is the very first kingdom. Then we have kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. So in what way, based on these characters, they have been classified. That is cell type, cell wall, the nuclear membrane, whether they're present or absent, then the body organization, then the mode of nutrients. So based on these characteristics, they have been classified. So this is the flow chart, and we are going to learn this in depth about each and individual kingdoms. Okay. Yes. The very first kingdom is the kingdom Monera. So the Monera kingdom then normally includes all kinds of bacteria having prokaryotic cells. So they do not have a well-defined nucleus. That is the very important characteristics of the kingdom Monera. So the kingdom Monera, you can actually see different shape of the bacteria can be observed. So some of the bacteria are such as cocci, they are spherical in shape. You can see here, they are normally spherical in shape. Some of the bacteria such as bacilli, they are normally rod shaped in structure. Some of the bacteria such as spirulina, they are very spherical in shape. And some of the bacteria like Vibrio, so they are comma in shape. Their structure is just like comma. Okay. So they normally reproduce by fission, as well as during unfavorable condition they normally reproduce by force formation, and even they normally reproduce by sexual mode of reproduction. That is, they are going to transfer the DNA from one bacterial cell to the another bacteria. So they have been again subclassified into three things. So there are three subclassification in the kingdom Monera. So the first one is Archaebacterians, the second one is Eubacteria, and the last one is Mycoplasma. You can see here. See, when I'm talking about the archaebacterians, these bacteria are present in a very harsh environmental condition, such as salty, marshy, and even in a hot springs also you can see. So you can see these bacteria where exactly we cannot imagine the life could ever exist. So there are also called as holophils. That means they're normally present in the very salty condition. Methanogens, that means the bacteria which normally they exist or present in the gut region of the cow or animals. Okay. So these methanogens are responsible for the production of the methane gas. That is biogas, and thermoacidophils respectively. See, thermoacidophils are they normally present in the very hot, conditions. The next subclass is Eubacteriae. So these Eubacteria are actually the true bacteria, and their cell wall is rigid, very hard, and they have flagella which helps for its motility. That is nothing but momentum. Okay. So again, they have been subclassified as photosynthetic autotrophs, then chemosynthetic autotrophs, and heterotrophs. So what do you mean by photosynthetic autotrophs? See, photosynthetic autotrophs, basically these bacteria include cyanobacteria. Cyanobacterians are the one bacteria, normally, commonly we normally call it as blue-green algae, as cyanobacterians. So there is a presence of the chlorophyll pigment as well as carotenoids is also present. Okay, so they are basically unicellular, flagellated, or they are also found sometimes grouped. That is colonial, and the body is actually covered by the mucilage. The body is actually covered by the mucilaginous sheet. Okay, so some of the example is nostoc and amoebite. So they have the heterocytes on the body, so where they can actually fix the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrate. So chemosynthetic autotrophs, that means the name itself says that they normally get their food by utilizing the inorganic substances, such as they play a very important role in the recycling of the nutrients. So they get the required energy from the ATP, which is actually being generated from the oxidize of various inorganic substances such as ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites. Okay. Then we have heterotroph. So when I'm talking about the heterotropics, so there are wide varieties of the heterotropic bacteria. So they basically act as a decomposers. They use various purposes like such as nitrogen fixation, curd production, and even sometimes as the antibiotic products. But not all the bacteria are useful. There are many bacteria which are also pathogenic, which means they causes various diseases even for the plants as well as animals. For example, citric canker, tetanus, typhoid, cholera that you can see, right? So they normally causes disease. These diseases are actually caused by this bacteria, that is heterotrophic. So the last one is the mycoplasm. So mycoplasm are actually, they lack by the cell wall, and they are the very smallest bacteria which can even survive without the oxygen. So this was regarding the kingdom Monera. The next kingdom is Protista. Kingdom Protista includes all the unicellular eukaryotes. Okay. So they are normally the photosynthetic in nature. That is, because of their photosynthetic in nature, they act as a linking between the plants as well as animal. So they also contain a well-defined nucleus and other membrane-bound cell organelles. So they includes the following subclasses such as protozoans, slim molds, then chrysophytes, then dinogoflagellates, and euglenoids. So what about the reproduction? They normally reproduce both by asexual mode of reproduction and sexual reproduction by forcing the involving two cells fusing together, forming the zygote. So we'll go with the subclasses first. So the very first subclasses of the phylum of the kingdom Protista is chrysophytes. So what is this chrysophytes? They normally includes all the diatoms as well as desmites, which is nothing but the golden algae together. So since you can see in the in this diagram or in this video, you can see they're very hard. That means their cell wall is actually made up of indestructible cell wall has been present because their cell wall is actually made up of cilia, and most of them are the photosynthetic in nature. So the cell wall is actually, they're overlapped to each other. That is, the shell is actually overlapped in such a way that it's fixed like a soap box on the outer surface. So after the death, so they normally get accumulated on the surface. So that is, the deposition of the cell walls will be accumulated on the surface, and it is going to make a hard kind of structure. So this is actually called as diatomaceous earth. Okay, so this is again very important. Diatomaceous earth is the deposit of the cell wall that gets accumulated. So since their cell wall is actually made up of cilia, which is really very hard and all, so they are normally used for filtration purpose as well as polishing purpose. The second subclass is the dinoflagellates. So dinoflagellates, they are photosynthetic in nature as well as most of them are marine. As you can see in this diagram, they normally appear in yellow, green, brown, red as well as blue in color according to what kind of pigment it is present. Okay. So their cell wall is actually made, the cell wall, on the cell wall, a stiff cellular plate is present. So you can see a stiff cellular plate is actually present on the cell wall. So one of the example is Goniaxile. So this actually undergoes a rapid, multiplication, and this causes a red tide in the ocean. And it is going to release some of the toxics, okay, in the water in such a way that it is going to kill, other marine animals such as fish and all because of those toxic. So many dinoflagellates, they also emit blue-green color. So because of it has a unique property called as bioluminescence. The next subclass is euglenoids. So what about euglenoids? They are again photosynthetic in nature, and they have the flagellated protista. Okay. So they are again a link, they will actually form a link between the plant as well as the animal. So they normally perform photosynthesis, and they do lack the cell wall. Clear? So they perform photosynthesis, but they lack the cell wall. That is, lacking of the cell wall is not a characteristics of plant, but photosynthesis is actually a characteristics of plant. So therefore, it acts as a linking between both plants as well as the animal. So the very characteristic features is the presence of the pellicel, which is actually the presence of the pellicil, which is actually a protein-rich layer, which makes them which makes their body flexible so that the momentum can be very flexible. So in absence of sunlight, what they do is they are going to depend on the smaller organisms. That is, they are going to engulf the smaller organism, and this behavior is called as heterotrophic behavior. Clear? So this was about the euglenoids. So the last one is, the another one is slim modes. So what about the slim modes? So they are actually saprophytic in nature. That means they normally feed on the other organic matters from the decaying twigs as well as leaves. So they normally during unfavorable condition, what happens is, so if you consider these as a slim modes here, so they are going to aggregate together. That means they are going to come together and they are going to aggregate together. This condition is actually called as plasmodium. Okay. So during unfavorable condition, a fruiting body normally emerges from this plasmodium, and this is the fruiting body. Okay. So these fruiting bodies will be containing the spores. So you can see here the number of spores are present, right? So these spores can survive for a longer period of time, even in a very harsh condition. And they are having the true cell wall. So later on, what happens during favorable condition, these spores will again develop into individual slim modes. The last subclass is the protozoans. So protozoans normally they contains all the unicellular, eukaryotic, heterotrophics. So which are both like parasites or predators. So there are majorly four major groups can be seen again in this protozoans. One is amoeboid protozoan, then flagellated protozoan, ciliated protozoan. The last one is sporozoites. So amoeboidal protozoans, they are actually characterized by the presence of pseudopodia. What is pseudopodia? It is a false body. That means pseudopodia are actually used for the momentum as well as catching of the prey. So you have seen the amoeba structure, right? Basically, it is amoeba structure. So because of the presence of the pseudopodia, they normally use these for the momentum, okay, and catching of its prey and all. So marine amoeboids, they normally have a cilia shell, and some of the amoeboids are also parasitic amoeboids. For example, Entamoeba histolytica, which normally causes amoeboic dysentery. Okay, so Entamoeba histolytica is one of the example for the amoeboid protozoans, which causes amoeboid dysentery. The second major group is flagellated protozoans. So flagellated protozoans are characterized by the presence of the flagella. Some of them even acts as a like some of them are parasitic, which causes various diseases such as trypanosoma. Trypanosoma is actually is a kind of flagellated protozoans. So they normally causes sleeping sickness. Then we have the third major group, that is ciliated protozoans. See, as the name itself indicates, so on the surface of the body, you can absorb n number of cilia, that is even thousands or n number of cilia. So together they will help for the coordination. That is, together they are going to coordinate together and help in the momentum in the water current. And even they help to catch the prey. Okay, so what about the gullet? So there is actually a presence of gullet. Gullet is nothing but on the body cavity, there will be an opening outside the body surface. Okay, that is actually called as gullet. So from where you are going to have water, food, and all will be intake, and it will be exhaled. So one of the example for the ciliated protozoans are paramecium. So the last one is protozoans. So they are actually characterized by the spores formation. Okay, sporo. That means that it actually forms what? Sporozoans. So, which is actually an infectious stage. For example, if you have heard about a plasmodium, so plasmodium is the sporozoans. So, they normally produce the spores, and that is the infectious stage. Before, before getting into the kingdom fungi, I really want you to, solve more and more MCQs based on the topics that you have yet till now you have covered. Because, okay, once you know that you are studying, you are listening the video lectures and all, that's fine. You are reading, that's fine. But how will you get to know that whatever you are reading, whether you are understanding, whether you are able to remember it or not? That is by attempting the test, right? So you can even you have a Telegram channel link here. So if you follow our MEMONEET Telegram channel, so even there, all this test and all will be updated, and we have the PYQ question papers also, where it covers around from 2000, 19 to 2024. All the questions have been covered since it has been based on the 2020, based on the Neet question paper pattern itself. So you will also get to know like how much you know. Yeah. See, getting into the next kingdom, that is fungi, I actually want you guys to, attend more number of MCQs because you are listening the video lectures, that's fine. You are even reading, practicing the topics, even that's fine. But how will you get to know that you know something, right? So for that, the only way to know is to attend the exams, to give the test, right? So you have a Telegram channel of our memo neat. So where you will be updated with all the test patterns and all. Even we have a PYQ question papers. So it covers from 2019 to 2024 neat. All the syllabus has been covered that even the questions have been, classified based on the chapters and topic wise. So if you have that book, easily you can, go through the questions and answer them and understand how much you know. So the next kingdom is kingdom fungi. So normally they pronounce it as fungi or fungi. Okay, so anything is fine. So kingdom fungi are actually the cosmopolitan in nature. That means they are found everywhere in the soil, water, air, even on the plants as well as animals. So they are heterotrophic and they normally get nutrients by absorption. Heterotrophics is nothing but they normally depend on other organisms for their food. So their cell wall is actually made up of chitin or fungal cellulose. So they are saprophytic, parasitic, or symbiotic mode of nutrition that they follow. So the major food reserve is actually the glycose here. So Saprobiotic means they normally get their nutrients from the dead and decaying organism. Parasitic means they're normally going to affect the other host of the living organism. Symbiosis means they will be having a mutual understanding between the two organisms and both the organisms will be beneficial. So they normally have vegetative, asexual, and sexual mode of reproduction. In vegetative reproduction, it is actually by the fragmentation, budding, or fission. See, fragmentation is nothing but so this is going to cut, and both the individual is again going to grow as an individual being. So budding is nothing but so if it is a fungi, okay, a small bud is going to appear. So from here, a small bud is going to appear. So based on that, and the bud gets separated from the main body, and again it is going to grow as an individual. Then by fission, this is clear. Then fission is nothing but the same budding process. Then if we come to the asexual reproduction mode, so it is by the spores formation such as conidia, zoospores, sporangial spores. Okay. So then coming to the asexual mode of reproduction, it is by the formation of the oospore ascospores and basidiospores formation. So that has actually been distinct from the food body. That means they normally generate from this part of the body itself. So in sexual reproduction, basically what happened, they are going to follow with two things. One is plasmogamy. Plasmogamy is nothing but there will be a fusion of two protoplasm, okay? And immediately two protoplasm, once they get fused, so it immediately follows the karyogamy. Karyogamy is nothing but so fusion of nuclei. So once the two protoplasm fuses, right? So each protoplasm will be consisting one nuclei. So both the nuclei immediately they are going to fuse. So in this way they are going to form the zygote. So basically in the basidiomycetes and acromycetes and plasmogamy, that is this thing, okay? So what are these basidiomycetes? They are actually types of fungi. See where what happens is this in these two subclasses of the fungi. So this plasmogamy is not immediately followed by karyogamy. That means after plasmogamy, immediately the karyogamy doesn't happen. As a result, what happens? Even the protoplasm got fused. Okay, thus protoplasm got fused, but the nuclear which is actually present here doesn't. It will be not fusing, right? So as a result, what happens? So there will be less left of two nuclei per cell. So in one each cell, you will be seeing two nuclei. So fungi are actually being divided into four major classes based on their type as well as mode of the spore formation and the structure of the mycelium. What are the four classes? The very first classes is phycomycetes, then ascomycetes, basidomycetes, then deuteromycetes. So when I'm talking about the phycomycetes, they prefer the moist damp areas for the development and they are obligated parasites. That means they are actually parasite, they show parasitic nature on the plants. So the structure of mycelium is nothing but a root-like or a branch-like structure, okay, of the fungi plant. So where the structure of mycelium is aseptase is nothing but so you will be not seeing any branches here. So it will be straight away like this. So there will be no branches you will be seeing. So what about the reproduction mode? So in asexual reproduction mode, mainly by the formation of the zoospores. Zoospores are actually motile, that is, it is actually movementable. So whereas aplanospores are non-motile in nature. So whereas in sexual reproduction, it forms isogamous, then angiogamous or oogamous, and the zygospores formation. So the example for the phycomycetes is mucor, rhizopus, and albugo. Clear? The second class is ascomycetes. Coming to the ascomycetes, they are saprophytic, coprophytic, parasitic, and decomposers. When I'm talking about coprophytic, they normally grow on or depend on dust of animals. Okay. And what about the mycelium structure? They are basically branched or separated. So when I'm talking about the asexual mode of reproduction, so it is conidia formation. That is, the conidia formation is nothing but they're formed exogenous in the conidiopores. See, when I'm talking of ascomycins, you can see like this. So fungi will be somewhat like this. Okay. So here the conidia formation can be observed. Then coming to the asexual reproduction mode, it is from the ascospores, that is formation of the endogenous in the asci. So the common example for the ascomycetes are sac fungi such as Penicillium, Aspergillus, Neurospora, Clavicipa, as well as yeast, which is actually the unicellular. The second class is basidiomycetes. So, what actually can you think of basidiomycetes? They are basically found in the soil. Then they also show a parasitic on the plant body, which causing the rust and the rust. Okay, so what is the structure of the mycelium now? They are branched or either they are separated. So they even show the vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation, and there is no asexual force formation will be observed here. So coming to the sexual reproduction, there is no specific sexual organs here. So basidiospores are formed in the basidium. Okay. Karyogame after dikaryon phase. So once the dikaryon phases happen, immediately the karyogame will start. So there is no sexual organs are present here. Basidiospores are formed in the basidium itself. And this karyogame, which I have explained you, that means normally protoplasm will be there, right? And it will be considering two individual, that is each individual nuclei. So fusion of nuclei will happens after the dikaryon phase. So common examples are mushroom, bracket fungi, puffballs, agaricus, and punica. The last class is, yes, the last class is deuteromycetes. So what do you know about deuteromycetes here? Just a minute. Yeah, coming to the deuteromycetes, they are basically saprophytic in nature or parasitic in nature. They even act as a decomposers, which helps in the mineral recycling. So, what about the mycelium structure? Again, they are branched or separated. Okay. So, coming to the asexual mode of reproduction, it is by the formation of the conidia, whereas in sexual mode of reproduction, so they are normally an imperfect fungi. So sexual reproduction is not seen here. So the examples are Trichoderma, Colitotrichum, then Alternarium. Okay, these are the examples of the deuteromycetes. The next kingdom is kingdom plantae. So the kingdom plantae, most of them are autotrophic in nature and they contains the chlorophyll. Okay, so chlorophyll is actually responsible for the photosynthesis, that is preparing its own food. And most of them are eukaryotic organisms. So the major characteristic is that has that been actually characterized by the presence of the rigid cell wall, which is actually made up of cellulose. And some plants are actually partially heterotrophic. That means if you consider insectivorous plants, they get their nutrients. That means they normally depend on even small insects for their nutrients, as well as they also depends on sunlight, water, and all for the nutrients also. Some of the examples for the insectivorous like Venus flytrap or bladderwort. So as well as some of them also act as a parasitic, okay, such as cuscute plant. So these normally acts as a parasitic. They infect the other plants or other plants, and they are going to extract the nutrients from that plants. So kingdom plantae includes algae, bryophytes, pteridiophytes, then gymnosperms and angiosperms and all. So about life cycle, if I'm talking about the life cycle of the kingdom plantae, it normally follows two life cycles. So two stages. One is haploid, gametophyte, and diploid, sporo, Right. See, it normally follows two life cycle. One is haploid gametophyte, as well as the second one is diploid sporophyte. So, since from one plant to the another plant, their life cycle differs. So, hence it is called as alternation of generation. Alternation of generation is nothing but, so these phases, that is from gametophyte to the sporophyte, the phases from gametophyte to the sporophyte differs from one plant to the another plant. So this phenomenon is actually called as alternation of generation. So you're going to learn about this alternation of generation and these all algae, bryophytes, stereophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms in the next chapter in depth and in detail. The next kingdom is kingdom Animaliae. See, I'm talking about the kingdom Animaliae. They all are heterotrophic in nature, eukaryotic and multicellular organisms. Okay, so they lack the cell wall. And coming to the mode of nutrition, they directly or indirectly depends on plants. Depends on plants for their food. Okay, so they have a digestive system. So digestion normally happens internally. So there is an internal cavity where normally we take the food and digestion happens in the internal cavity. So how do they store the reserve food? It is in the form of one is glycogen or in the form of fat. So their mode of nutrition is actually Holozoic mode of nutrition. Holozoic mode of nutrition is by ingesting of the food. Yeah. So they even follow a particular proper growth pattern, and they also have a proper structure, and almost all the organisms which comes under the kingdom Animalia, so they show locomotion. Okay. And they even do have a proper sensory organ as well as neuromotor. They show normally neuromotor mechanism. The kingdom Animalia, they normally reproduce through sexually. So there is where both male and female, they normally copulate to each other, and as a result, they produce an offspring. So and the development, there will be an embryonic development, okay, when a proper stage of development goes on. So there are certain other organisms which have not been considered or else they are not added to the five kingdom system of classification because their characteristics differs and they have their own unique characteristics. Some of them are like viruses, viroids, prions, and all. So they are actually put separately and they are not considered under five kingdom system of classification. So we'll study one by one or we'll discuss one by one here. So the very first one is viruses. Okay. Yeah, viruses. So Levinsky in 1892, he gave the name called virus to the casual organism that is the tobacco mosaic disease. So the organisms which cause the tobacco mosaic disease. So to that he normally named it as the viruses. So the organism is tobacco mosaic virus. So later on, Bergenic, he actually extracted the fluid from the deceased plant of the tobacco, and he named or he called it as the Contagium vivum fluidium. Okay, and later on he has observed and studied that how this virus and all has been infected to the healthy plant. So later on, Stanley, he crystallized this tobacco mosaic virus for the very first time, and there he was able to study the structure of this tobacco mosaic virus. So the structure, they are normally acellular in nature, containing the nucleic acid core. So nucleic acid core means it is containing both the RNA as well as DNA here. Just a minute. See, this is it is normally having the RNA. So this is actually the capsule. So it normally has both RNA as well as DNA. Okay. So which is surrounded by a protein coated, which is called as capsule. So viruses, they use the host mechanically to multiply inside the host cells. That is the mode of to reproduce, they normally take up the host body to multiply, and they multiply inside the host cell. And they normally exist as a crystalline form outside the host cell. That is inactive form outside the host cell and active form inside the host cell. So they are basically obligated parasites and causes various diseases in both plants as well as animals. For example, common cold or AIDS, polio, mumps, and chickenpox, etc. This all, whatever the disease, right? It is actually caused by the viruses itself. And even there are various mosaic disease have been also caused in the plants such as tobacco, cucumber, tomato, etc. and all. So you have seen the leaf curling, right? And the yellow the veins of the leaves being yellowish in color. So this is actually caused by the infection of virus. Virus that actually infect the plants will be having the single strand RNA. So whereas the viruses which is going to infect the bacteria, okay, so we'll be having double stranded DNA. So the virus which is going to infect the bacteria is actually called as bacteriophage. So the next one is the viroids. So viroids, they're actually very small infectious agent. They are normally found. So they consist of the nucleic acid, but they lack the protein code. So protein code means if I consider this as a virus, okay, so they have a nucleic acid inside, but it doesn't have a protein code. Protein code actually protects the virus from the harsh environmental condition. So in 1971, T.O. Danier, he actually discovered this viroids and as a causative agent of the potato spindle tuber disease. Clear? So in the as a potato spindle tuber disease, there he have discovered that this disease is actually caused by the viroids infection. So they are normally free from the RNA. The next one is prions. So they contain abnormal folding proteins. Prions will be containing abnormal folding proteins and have a size which is similar to the viruses. Their size is somewhat similar to the viruses. So even once they're infected to any of the host, right? So there they are going to change the shape of the normal protein of the host by transmitting their misfolding protein. So you're getting, so once they infect any healthy host, right? So they are going to change the shape of the normal protein by transmitting its misfolded protein. So they causes many neurodegenerative diseases such as Bowen's spongiform encyclopediae, so that is BSC in the cattle, and CR Jacob disease in the human beings. This last one is lichens. So lichens, they're actually symbiotic in nature. So that is they're helpful. they follow the symbiosis mutual benefit association. So they have a mutual benefit association of the algae and the fungi can be seen here. So algae, it is an autotrophic and it normally provides the food to the fungi. So whereas in return, fungus, it provides a protection to the algae and it gives a shelter to it. So lichens do not grow in the polluted area. Hence, I can consider the lichens as a good pollution indicator. So where lichens are there, that means it is actually free of pollution. And if lichens are not there, that means that area is actually polluted. So this was regarding the biological classification, and I have summarized the entire chapter in a very easiest way and in a very brief way. I hope you all have understood it. If you have understood it, please comment thumbs up in the group in the message box. And remember, you need to practice more and more because if you practice more and more, right, you will be perfect with the subject and you will be having the grip on the topics. So keep on practicing, keep on revising, and keep on solving more